Hello and welcome to the AITD Learning webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about learning and business performance. And we have an intriguing question for you. Are you using a hammer to put in a screw?
Quite an interesting question.
Interesting question.
Yes.
I have this with great pleasure. I introduce and welcome from all the way from Canada, Ajay Pangarkar. And we are going to be looking at business performance, the relevance of learning in the workplace, and how learning can actually engage better with the C-suite. Yes, that's all about your budgets. So I would just like to put this in context. I've been involved with the AITD for quite some time. AITD, Australian Institute of Training and Development, has been around since 1971. That's a very long time, and in that time we've been on an interesting learning journey, and that learning journey reflects the workplace and the changes in technology, the changes in our society, and also the growing globalization. And in fact, you're the personification of that. Our members, we've been looking at technology and how it affects our members. Our members, in fact, are coming in from India, from Singapore, the Netherlands, even right across to the US and London for our awards that we have each November. And so we have literally, without even realizing we're on this journey, we have become an Asia-Pacific organization.
It's fantastic.
So that is quite fascinating, isn't it? So really, we need to change our game, and we need to start moving from a trainer's perspective into learning and delivery in terms of business performance.
Absolutely.
So your journey, let's hear more about you and your background.
My journey, and I'll be brief about this, my journey was, it started off as I was a director of a major Fortune 50 company. And this is how my journey started off in L&D. As a director, I was told to send my staff on training several times. And they always came back without any type of tangible evidence that they can improve my divisional performance. And I got quite irritated about it because money was being taken out of my budget, and I wasn't meeting performance expectations. And so I was held accountable to that. And one time I told my bosses that I'm not sending employees to training anymore until learning and development tells me or shows me or demonstrates how they're going to help me improve my performance. Henceforth, move ahead 20 plus years. And my background is as a CPA in Canada. I'm a finance and accounting professional. I went to do an adult education background degree to complement that. And fast forward 20 plus years, I am trying to now be the voice to help L&D deliver value to the organization. How will they achieve and help the organization meet performance expectations from the stakeholders' perspective? Because that's really important. We have to look at it from the stakeholders' perspective.
So what do you think hampers learning practitioners in engaging in that conversation with the leaders of their organization? There's
historically in L&D, we've always been that anomaly in the organization where business leaders didn't really understand us. And so they would throw money at us and say, just, skill up the employees and make them function appropriately. And so we weren't really held accountable. In recent years, we've become exceptionally accountable, or we have become, in the eyes of business leaders, to become accountable for what we do. And I say this because we're given money and resources in organizations, and you just said it, we're going global, and there's a lot of competition within the world. And so the employees are the most important resource in an organization. So when they allocate money to us, they want to see the value coming back. However, that being said, L&D has not been able, or I shouldn't say that, has not provided evidence in the past to show they were accountable. So now they're having trouble demonstrating that accountability.
Well, that's curious, isn't it? Because as learning practitioners, we think we are demonstrating evidence. Most of us are using Kirkpatrick, our evaluation sheets, level 1 to 4.
Yes.
So, but you're telling us that we're not actually showing or demonstrating clearly business outcomes.
Yes, and I want to be careful about this. I know L&D people are well intended to trying to show business value, but they're not showing the business value that their business leaders want to see. What I'm saying is that we're demonstrating what we do in learning, but we're not demonstrating clearly or communicating clearly to the business leaders how we're moving the performance objectives, or the terms that we use in business is key performance indicators.
Yeah.
And so business leaders, all they want to know, and I like to say that you introduce it by, are we using a hammer to put in a screw? What we have to be communicating is, how are we moving the key performance indicators of the organization? So leaders like to say, don't show us what they learn, show us what they can apply. And when we show the application of somebody learning something into the organization, so if I was trained in a skill and I improved my performance on my job by 10% or 5%, it just made me more productive and more efficient. And that being said, would translate in a causal manner, but it will translate to improved performance in some way for the organization. Ultimately, demonstrating positive financial results in some form. And I'm not just saying profitability, it could be a lot of things. But you can see that in many organizations. The one I like to use as a famous example is Toyota. They believe in continuous improvement. For 50, 60 years, they believe in continuous improvement. And so they've enveloped L&D as a part of the fabric and the culture of the organization. So when they allow a employee to stop the production line, they're learning from that. They're not just saying, there's something wrong, let's fix it. They're saying, what is wrong here? How can we improve that this does not happen again? And it's not about saying, let's go get learning. Learning is already involved. And so that's a little bit of difference. That's showing value and accountability. So if you ask Toyota if they invest money in training, they would say to you, we invest money even continuously in training. It doesn't matter what economic circumstance, we just keep putting money into it because we believe that's the key to improving our products.
So it's a learning organization.
It is very much so, although they will not admit to that.
Right.
They will not clearly state up and say that we are a learning organization. They just believe they're in a continuous improvement organization, which learning is one component of it.
Right.
So that's what we have to be very clear on how we communicate to business leaders.
Now, Ajay has actually written a book called The Trainer's Balanced Scorecard.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So this is where it gets a little tricky, because I know a lot of L&D people out there are now saying, well, we're performance. Okay, fine, that's fantastic. But what we often forget in business is that performance is an organizational role, not a learning and development role. So many of the viewers probably know of the Balanced Scorecard. It's the granddaddy of all performance frameworks. And the two creators of that, Robert Kaplan and Dr. David Norton, created this framework to be able to translate the mission of the organization into operational objectives, performance objectives into the organization. Now, in that framework, there's 4 pieces, and one of the pieces is called learning and growth. They included that because they felt, and this is 25, 30 years ago.
I remember it. I did the MBA. Yes.
So learning and growth, and Dr. Kaplan said to this to a bunch of C-suite executive once back a number 20 years ago, that you leaders for your future survival of your organization must believe that the development of your people is the key to your success, not innovative products. The innovative products will be a consequence or a result of investing in your people. And he goes, that's why we included learning and growth. That was 30 years ago. Fast forward again today, we have, 30 years later, we have learning and growth as seen as one of the most relevant supportive actions within an organization. So, you can pull out any famous company in this that is successful. Starbucks, Apple, Google, Facebook, Toyota, General Electric. All these organizations have invested in their people to become the leaders that they become. And so when they embrace the performance frameworks, that's what they're looking at. And that's what the book speaks about.
Yeah.
We speak about the perspective of strategy and business outcomes, but we show how to connect learning and growth into the operational side.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, you did mention something about the evaluation of learning.
Yes.
So
we had that discussion.
We did have a discussion about that. How can learners actually improve upon that and make it more meaningful?
Learning evaluation is important in learning. And I want to say that very clearly because we're hired as subject experts in L&D to do what we do well. And let's not forget that. People accuse me of saying, you make us seem like we're not of value. You're hired for that subject expertise. And you need to keep these learning evaluation models in your expertise. You cannot state a learning evaluation model to a business leader, they will not understand it. But the intended evaluation models are very clear that we go from, if the learner has gained something out of it, all the way up to how it impacts the organization, right? And that skill set. Now, what business leaders will not understand is why are you using that when there's a performance framework already in place? They're looking at these very precise key performance indicators. And I tell L&D practitioners and the organizations I work with, I don't even have to tell them because they know it. They focus, their connection is into those key performance indicators, and they work with they become one cog in the wheel of the solution. So if I'm trying to improve productivity of a manufacturing process, okay, I'm the part of L&D that looks at identifying employee weaknesses and the production processes so I can resolve those things. But there's other elements that go into production processes, how they organize their production and all this kind of stuff, what type of equipment they're using. So there's a lot of moving, sorry for the pun here, but there's a lot of moving parts in the analysis of improving production. My role in L&D is looking at, okay, there's a key performance indicator. They want to improve or reduce defects in production by 5%. What impact will I have in my learning role in identifying the right skill set to help them reduce that defect rate? And so if I can move that indicator even by 1% down, if I go from 5 to 4%, I've just demonstrated a value, because that 1% difference in reduction of defects translates into maybe thousands or millions of dollars of savings. Or even intangibles like significantly increasing customer satisfaction from the products, which results down the road of them buying more products. So we can't show a direct correlation to our work, but if we move that needle just a little bit, eventually they will see that result. And that's really what's important. I don't want to be hard on L&D. I just want them to understand that it's not about showing immediate results. We're a support function. And as a support function, just like every other support function, we cannot see immediate results. Marketing is in the same way. IT is in the same way. Production is in the same way. They don't show immediate results. And we have to learn that we have to move the performance indicator and not always measure based on learning evaluation models.
So where does that put the use of return of investment within this equation?
So there's two, in my perception, this is where people always get confused with this. Return on investment for business leaders is a very specific terminology. Your business leaders in their educations have learned how to calculate return on investments in a literal sense, okay, in a financial sense. And all these formulas that they learn are in textbooks that I've been educated from. Now, we use it in a figurative sense as human beings. Like, you invest in something, you say, I want to return on this. We also use it in learning as a figurative sense. But when we're communicating with a C-suite leader who's been formally educated in business, and you say return on investment, they immediately go into what they've learned in school of how to calculate return on investment. We're saying, well, this is what we're going to give you as value. So we have to be careful on the terminology we use. A lot of the return on investment calculations that are out there floating around in training do not actually exist in any business textbook. So please be careful when you're actually applying the training ROI methodologies, because business leaders are going to look at it and say, that's not credible because that's not a formula we even recognize. And there are standards out there that business leaders have to follow. I'm not making any of this up, by the way. You can look all this up and verify it. But there are things like international financial reporting standards that is worldwide, that is a legal and required accounting standard for all organizations around the world. So in a business, when you say ROI, training ROI, and it's not in the IFRS, we have an issue of credibility. So all I'm saying is that if you're going to use the term return on investment, use more terms aligned with, here's the value we're going to provide to the organization, and this is how we're going to improve performance, rather than the literal sense of ROI, because that's where the leaders are going to go with that thought process.
So what you're saying is use the word value,
yes,
and how it was linked to business performance outcomes.
Yes, absolutely. And if you allow me to use two very quick examples. One in marketing. Well, marketing is a little different nowadays with technology now because of the algorithm, but prior to the algorithms that we have in marketing, when they would invest in a marketing campaign, an advertising campaign, or you couldn't tell exactly how much was sold from that marketing campaign. Although you might see an increase in sales, there was no direct correlation between the marketing and the sales. They just assumed that happened. But that showed value in the marketing. IT is the same way. We invest in an IT infrastructure in a company. How do they know that if we invest, $50,000, $1 million in IT systems, that it's going to contribute value to the organization? There's no direct no direct correlation to, a financial benefit. But if we don't have it, we see the impact on the organization. So learning is in the same situation where if we don't have it, we see an impact on our organization. So there is a need, and if there is a need, show the value of how it impacts the performance of the organization. If you do those simple things, and I always say, I don't want to undermine learning and development, it's not a complicated space. We seem to be trying to make it complicated. It's actually a pretty well-directed space and a very simplified space where we can show performance improvement. And the companies I work with do it very direct and simply, and they get their learning and development departments get more money. So it's.
So we now use the word data analytics.
Yes.
And in fact, AITD is doing an online training course for practitioners on data analytics in learning because it's becoming more accessible with regard to the technology.
Yeah.
So how does that fit within your experience?
Analytics is a fantastic tool, and again, I go back to how you introduced this. Are we using the right tools to deliver the right solutions? So. Unlike a 3-year-old that gets a new toy and runs around saying this is the greatest toy in the world and then gets bored with it and goes to the next toy, we need to be more judicious in our selection of tools. Now, analytics is a fantastic tool because what it does for us, and as you're aware, Siobhan, is that it provides us a very precise assessment of where the weaknesses are. And I think that's fantastic because now if you can, it's like an algorithm in marketing, and Amazon does it, right? It scares me how well they know my buying habits because they have these fantastic algorithms. Well, analytics is the same way here. If we can look at the analytics and identify the precise areas of weaknesses, we can deploy learning more tactically, more what I call in a sniper approach. We'd be very, very direct in how we address that situation. So we're not throwing people into courses or e-learning courses. We just are we can address that weakness immediately and solve it. In my experience, I've used it actually 10 years ago. Unfortunately, I don't want to name an organization out loud, but it's a pretty famous organization, consumer electronics organization. I won't name names, maybe you can guess. But in that, about over 10 years ago, we were able to do analytics. We were running 2 million tests for 8,000 employees per year.
2 million
tests for 8,000 employees worldwide for 8,000 employees for this organization to assess where their weak areas were in their skill sets. And as a result, the learning and development team was able to identify exactly where they were weak, and it was an iterative process that we keep improving until they became so well that now the scope of improvement went from here to here. And at that point, they became number one in customer service. So that's how strong analytics could be. And so I'm a strong believer in analytics. However, now people seem to be jumping on the bandwagon. And again, I'm worried that it's going to be another tool that's going to be abused and not used appropriately. So just be well aware what the purpose of the analytics is my opinion.
So we're looking at learning practitioners using this area. So they're going to have to work with different people across the organization and possibly data scientists that are outside the organization.
Yes.
Are there any particular tips or other considerations? Because it does actually sound as if it will be initially quite confronting, some of this data, if it's to become, basically shedding light and greater transparency into kind of, and possible weaknesses. So that's going to be an interesting conversation.
Yes.
I'm thinking ahead.
Yes. No, you're absolutely 100% correct. So what a couple of things I like to address here. One is what I like to tell L&D people is, first of all, I take L&D people on field trips in the organization.
Yeah.
I take them out of their cubicles and their offices and say, let's go meet operations. Let's go. And I actually arrange meetings with different departments. And not just the ones that are addressing the weaknesses in, like the operations or whatever, but actually they're partners. So to your point, how do we address this analytics? Well, guess what? You're going to have to include the IT department and talk to. You have to include the finance department because they're going to be, determining what type of investment is required for this. You're going to be requiring, even the area that needs to be improved. You need to bring those people in. So you have this cross-functional team that you need to partner with and get to know. So before these things happen, I always say I encourage them, go have lunch with them. Go meet with them. Just schedule a meeting for a couple of hours. If it's your internal client, learn about their business even before they have a need. Maybe in that meeting you'll discover they have a need that they don't even know, and then you can help them, and you've just became a hero in their eyes. Go to IT and say, look, how do we work together? I know I need LMS, I need technology, like LMS and e-learning. Talk to them because they're your partners. Or talk to finance and learn how to build a business case around a financial investment for technology. There's a lot of opportunities we can do, but if we sit in our offices waiting, and this is a term being used in L&D a lot lately, being order takers.
Yes, indeed.
Then you deserve to be an order taker. I'm sorry to be blunt. If you're going to sit there and wait for people to come to you and be reactive, you're not going to be seen adding any value. But I want them to become proactive. We said it earlier, in the performance framework, learning growth is in that. That implies that business leaders see a tremendous value in learning in an organization. So capitalize on it. Go out and meet with the people. Even go meet with the C-suite. Have a chat with them and just say, where are we going with this organization in the next 5 years? So I can plan accordingly to make sure all my departments all the partners, internal partners, are able to be well equipped in the skill set. That said, that's really the important point here. Go out and speak to people. Go out and learn about the organization. Don't sit back and wait.
So really, maybe I can ask a contentious question.
Please, I love contentious questions.
It sounds to me like traditionally learning, certainly in Australia, has traditionally been part of the HR function.
Yeah.
But what you're suggesting is that within an organisation, it's really more positioned within
operations. Yes.
That's quite a change.
And this is not me saying this, and I'm a big believer in this. I believe if training in L&D is under HR, it's wasted. HR is in a very important role, but they're about the function of supporting the employee as, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a support of the employee in their role within an organization. And conceptually you think, okay, training falls under that. But in reality, every organization I've worked with has never included training under HR. They've held it as actually a separate support unit. And they see it as more of an operational partner. And again, I think I mentioned to you prior to doing this interview, the clients that I work with actually don't call me. Personally, I don't think they need me because they're already progressive enough to think that, okay, we're including them in this, and their L&D department are actually proactive. So everything I've been sharing with you is not something, I'm trying to preach. It's I witnessed. So these people go out and they are part of the fabric. They collaborate with HR, but they're not part of HR. And they're seen as a very dynamic, proactive instrument to improving performance within an organization.
That's certainly been my personal experience.
Yes.
Once you're moved into business strategy or business improvement, then L&D is a whole different enabler.
Absolutely.
Compared to that of HR.
It's a key word, actually.
Yes.
It's a great point. I use that word a lot. It's an enabler.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a role that frames the organization. And we go back to the Toyota example. It's part of the culture. And again, that's an important point. To be a successful enabler in an organization, the leadership has to see the value so they can make it a part of the cultural aspect of the organization. So every company I've named has a learning culture. Again, they don't say that. They just accept it.
Yeah.
And so it would be an insult to say to Apple or to Toyota that you're a learning organization. They don't see it that way.
Yeah.
They just say we have an open and improving culture. And that's a little bit of the difference. And it might be semantics, but I think there's a difference there.
So to enable learning to become a key part of influencing business performance, they need to have a partnership, and a partnership that is both operational and strategic. So that's quite a different kind of perspective. And again, not to sit there as a order taker.
Yes.
But to become proactive in understanding how the business operates, and to have a more kind of more holistic view of how learning can influence outcomes.
There's always this cry out there about learning needs to have a seat at the table. And it's the table that they're speaking about is the decision-making table, the business decision-making table, where the C-suite leaders sit around. And you have IT, you have HR, you have all these support functions, production, marketing, all around the table. But learning is crying out to have a seat independently. And again, the organizations that I've spoken about have them at the table. They expect them at the table. They expect them to be active and contribute to the performance of the organization, so they're not an afterthought. Most, I wouldn't say most, but many organizations do not have them at the table because they haven't proven that they could show any value. And so at the end of the day, and that's because they're probably, again, we're using a sleight of term here, but order taker. I mean, maybe it's too loose, but what I'm saying is that they're waiting for them, the operations to come to them.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be waiting anymore. We're a very, and I love, and maybe it's a bit of tough love on my part, but I appreciate L&D. And I want them to become successful. And if you're sitting in your desk waiting for them to come to you, then it's, I hate to say this, it's deserved. Because you're not acting, you're not proacting. And that's very important to me that they get out there and move. So if you want to see it at the table, learn how to speak in terms they understand. Again, the other analogy I use that, if you travel to another country and you're well traveled, so when you go to another country, you learn at least a few phrases to communicate with the locals, at least to have the etiquette and the courtesy to do that. You don't want to be insulting and not speak their language. But you can't be fluent in it. Same thing here. We might be a state or a province in that company. But when we leave our own state or province in that company, we're now into their country. So they want to hear in terms, not in learning terms, they want to hear in business and operational terms. And again, they say, well, that's impossible. It is not impossible. I worked with accounting and finance departments, and they speak the financial and accounting language internally. But when they go out and meet their business leaders, they're speaking in terms that they understand. Marketing the same way, IT the same way. They don't talk about constructing an IT system or investing in an IT system. They talk about what the IT system is going to do for the organization. Again, they're always speaking a language that business leaders understand and want to hear. Right. Do more of that, and you will be gold with your business leaders.
So to encapsulate what we've learned today on the AITD Learning webinar series, AJ, what you're saying is to use the same language as your stakeholder, your CEO, your accounting, your finance, etc., to use the metrics or kind of evaluations that have meaning.
Or that already exist.
That already exist within the organization, as opposed to, well, you can still use your evaluation, Kirkpatrick, etc., inside your inside your department or with yourself, but you need to have be able to demonstrate using metrics that's more meaningful to the business. And what was the final point that you...
Well, so that's the most important one, actually, is the KPIs. I always find L&D, when I work with L&D departments, some of them, try to invent their own metrics. And that's of no value to the business leaders. It might be value to you internally, but why are you wasting your time when the answers already exist? And remember in school when you had to take an exam? If I told you as a teacher, I'm giving you all the answers before, but I'm not giving you the questions, and you have the answers in front of you, you just need to know what questions correspond to those answers. Well, guess what? In the performance framework, all the answers are there. You just need to be able to ask the right questions back to the leaders. And they're already there. You pick on those performance indicators. And when you said to speak the language, so if you're speaking to a CEO, you speak at a very high level of business objectives. When you speak to an operational director, you speak to exactly the short-term objectives of what they need. So at the end of the day, it's about speaking the language, you leveraging the indicators that already exist within the organization. And may I add one more very quickly, and become what I call lean. We have the technologies, we have the tools available to be non-disruptive in the workflow, or limited disruption in the workflow, and acts and provide learning when it's needed, how it's needed, where it's needed. So there's no need for us to start dragging people out into courses. Even e-learning, I've seen companies say to me, we have e-learning in, we have an e-learning course, but they're still taking a person out and putting them before a computer for 6 hours. Okay, what's the difference between that and putting them in a classroom for 6 hours? E-learning is meant to, let's give you a solution now and help you learn something immediately. Again, I don't want to make light of this because I know maybe people might come back on this, but it's not that challenging or difficult to provide appropriate learning solution in the right targeted way. And so I don't want L&D audience to understand that it is more complex than it should be. And if we keep it simple and we address these main points, even if they do 1% of what I just said, they'll be seen as very value-driven resource within the organization.
AJ?
Yes.
AJ Pangarkar.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you so much. It's been a fascinating conversation. I think it's clear to say that we have learnt quite a number of key points. I would like to thank you for being part of the AITD Learning Webinar Series. Until the next time, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.